Good morning. It is Friday, September 4th, 2020, and I'm here for Bed Talk number 120. As you can see, actually over here, um, today I am dedicating this Bed Talk to Tom Seaver and to the idea of idols and models and life lessons. And honestly, I don't know where this is going. I just felt compelled to share from my heart about this experience in my life with Tom Seaver. See, I first learned about Tom Seaver when I was a little kid. Some of you know this, some don't, but my dad played Major League Baseball, Ron Nischwitz, and he played with the Tigers, Indians, back to the Tigers. And his last team was the New York Mets. And in fact, he was with the Jacksonville team, the AAA team of the Mets in 1966. And that was Tom Seaver's first and only season in the minor leagues. The next year, 1967, he went up to the Mets, the big league club, and became Rookie of the Year. And I knew Tom Seaver as a little boy. I remember spring training when I was probably, 1966. This is probably, I don't know, I'm 7 or 8 years old. I remember meeting Tom Seaver and Tug McGraw and some of the other Mets. And so I immediately became fascinated with the Mets and Tom Seaver, and grew up as I said, Tom Seaver was the man in my life. And I remember at one point my dad told me a story that in the minor leagues he had been Tom Seaver's mentor, and like most young kids, I didn't believe him. I thought, come on, Dad, you're making the story bigger than it is, and I should have known better. Because a few years later, probably a preteen, I bought a book about Tom Seaver and by Tom Seaver. And in the book, Tom Seaver thanked my dad for being that mentor and sort of mentoring him in that one season of the minors before he went to the majors. So I grew up a Tom Seaver addict. I loved it. He certainly was very successful. I don't know that I knew why I loved him other than he was a great pitcher. I was a pitcher too. I tried to emulate him. I remember standing in the front driveway and pitching games against this stone wall, and I was always Tom Seaver in those games. But to give you an idea of the level of my idoldom, the level to which I considered Tom Seaver an idol, is I always wanted to wear number 41 throughout my life. In college, I was able to pick a number. I wore number 41. In playing summer ball later over the last 30 years, I was always number 41. My first email address when email came out was georgethomas41@yahoo.com, because Tom Seaver's legal name is actually George Thomas Seaver. My freshman year of college, I met some guys and told them about how much I loved Tom Seaver. And for the next 3 years, my nickname with them was George, which no one understood because they didn't know, where's George come from, Jeff Nischwitz. So, this was a guy that I emulated throughout my life. I was always paying attention to his career. I remember being bummed out. I was probably in 1978. So I was 19 years old, and Tom Seaver had pitched 3 one-hitters. I still remember it, with the Mets, but never a no-hitter. He was traded to the Reds, and he pitched a no-hitter for the Reds. And I woke up that morning. My mom said, "Did you hear that Tom Seaver pitched a no-hitter?" I was like, "Oh my God, that's so amazing. I didn't see it." And she said, "Yeah, your brother, my younger brother, was at the game." And I said, "Hey, how was the game?" He said, "Oh, it was boring. Nothing happened." So my brother had this experience of a boring game, and I felt like I had missed that opportunity. And probably one of the biggest memories I have of Tom Seaver before adulthood was I was probably 15 years old, and I go to a Reds game. Tom was still with the Mets at the time. And back then you had more access to the players, and they would come out and you could sign autographs. And I remember all these people surrounding Tom Seaver when he came out of the clubhouse, wanting his autograph. And my dad and I were standing over in the corner, and I vividly remember Tom Seaver signing autographs and looking up, looking up and seeing us, and leaving the crowd and walking away to come over to say hello to us. Shook my dad's hand, shook my hand, and it was one of those sort of, oh my God, this is Tom Seaver, and should I ever wash my hand again? I remember getting his books and sending him and asking him to sign them, and he did. I used to have signed books from Tom Seaver, including his famous The Art of Pitching, that somehow my mom gave away or sold for a quarter in a garage sale over the years. And as some of you know from looking on social media, I had an opportunity in January of 2018 to spend about half a day with Tom. A client of mine in Napa Valley, turns out, did work with Tom and his family and his vineyard, his winery. I saw the name. They made a phone call to Tom's wife, Nancy, and Nancy, they remembered my dad and my mom and said, yeah, Tom will meet with you. And I spent, like I said, about a half a day with Tom. We had lunch, went up to his vineyard at his house in California, and he showed me the vineyard, and we talked about wine, we talked about life, we talked a little bit about baseball. And I just remember, interesting, when I pulled into the restaurant for lunch, I saw him walking in, I immediately recognized him, and I was terrified, like nervous, like, and I felt like a 10-year-old kid again. And when I sat down with Tom, it probably took about 10 minutes to put the 10-year-old away and just sit down. At that time, I think I was 58 or 59 and Tom's 73, to just talk to him kind of man to man. I didn't ask a lot of questions. He shared some stories. And I came away with these takeaways from that interaction. I realized how intense of a man he is. And I share a lot of those qualities in my life, being intense. I realized how intelligent and thoughtful he was, and how dedicated he was to his work and to excellence. I was talking to my dad today, who's struggling with this loss of someone he knew so well many years ago. And here's one thing he told me about Tom Seaver. He said, back in the day, during the day, players would like hang out and screw around and go to the pool on game days. He said Tom Seaver never went swimming on game days because he was so dedicated to his craft, to being in the best physical and mental shape. He was committed. He worked so hard at being great. He had amazing ability, but he worked hard. And the other story I remember, one of them that Tom shared with me that day, was about Nolan Ryan, another great pitcher, so many records, Hall of Famer. And he said, I remember one day sitting down with Nolan Ryan when he was still with the Mets, and I told him, Nolan, it's time to go to work. Because Nolan had incredible talent, but he said he really wasn't working hard. And you see what happened because he went to work. So I never realized how much I learned from Tom Seaver. I learned about focus, about being committed, about thoughtfulness, about intentionality, and a commitment to excellence. And I learned about there's a level of intensity that creates, an outcome. I'm sad. I'm still sad. And it's kind of weird to feel sad about the loss of someone who I didn't know that well, but really shared a lot of my entire life with, from a young child to spending time with him a couple years ago. I don't know what this lesson is for you. I just knew it was important for me to share it today. Tom Seaver mattered in my life, and he was a big part of my experience of growing up as a kid, and one of the most incredible experiences I had as an adult. So I guess what I'm saying is, rest in peace, Tom Seaver. You made a difference in my life and so many different people's lives. I encourage you to read some articles that are coming out right now about him. It speaks so much about his professionalism, his attitude, his commitment, his dedication to being excellent. He was a good guy. And he was a guy that loved the game, and he respected the game. And he excelled at the game, made it to the Hall of Fame. So maybe it's about learning a lesson from this, and maybe it's just me sharing a little bit of my love and connection with Tom Seaver. So keep taking care of yourselves and everybody around you, and stay connected, and keep telling your stories to each other. I guess that's one of my takeaways from his death. He died of a form of dementia as well as COVID. And I learned years ago that the challenge of people with dementia is they lose their stories. I hope I never lose my stories, and I hope you never lose your stories, but cherish the stories, share your stories, ask people to hear their stories. I guess maybe that's my big takeaway. Have a wonderful holiday weekend, and I will see you next week.